Sky above 442B was orange and heavy. Wheeler, 7 years old, did not care about the color. He cared about the toy vehicle in his hand, a small truck that his father had made before he died in the mine collapse 2 years ago. Pushed the truck through the red dirt near the colony fence, making engine sounds with his mouth. The sounds were quiet because his mother had told him to play quietly today. Something was happening in the colony. The adults had stopped talking when he walked past them. The colony was not big. Maybe 200 people lived inside the steel and plastic structures that made up New Harmony. The name was a joke's mother had told him once. There was not much harmony. People were tired. The crops did not grow well in the alien soil. 3 workers had died in the tunnels last month. They were coming today, and nobody talked about what that meant, but could feel the fear in the air like heat from the thermal generators. He sat in the dirt and watched his truck. The fence behind him was tall and made of metal. Beyond it was the wild. The wild was dangerous, everyone said so, but was tired of playing inside the colony structures. Inside, everything was and cold. Outside, the world was alive. His mother was in the medical facility, which was on the other side of the colony. Wheeler worked hard. She was always tired, tried not to cause problems. That was why he played outside, away from her worry. The fence had a section that had been damaged last month in a storm. James, the security chief, had fixed it, but the fix was not perfect. Knew about the gap because he had watched the repair. He could fit through if he tried. He did not go through the gap, not yet. He just played with his truck and watched the orange sky. The sound of engines came from the north. The ship was landing, had never seen a, but he had heard people describe them. They were big, they were strong. They had teeth and claws. They did not respect human laws. The central government on Mars had sent messages saying to be careful, to be polite, to give them what they wanted. That was what everyone said when someone stronger came to your home. Made his truck climb a small hill of dirt. The truck fell over and tumbled down the other side. Laughed. It was a small laugh, quiet, but it was real. "You should come inside," a voice made turn his head. It was one of the workers who sometimes ate meals near, and his mother was carrying equipment, walking quickly toward the colony center. He did not stop to wait for answer. Picked up his truck and thought about going inside. The gates of the colony were closing. He could see people moving quickly. Something was happening, something big. But inside, everything would be the same. His mother would be too busy to talk to him. He would sit in the quarters they shared, in a small room with recycled air that tasted like metal. He looked at the gap in the fence. Was 7 years old and did not understand many things. He did not understand why his father had to go into the tunnels. He did not understand why his mother cried sometimes when she thought he was asleep. He did not understand why they were so important that the whole colony had to be afraid. But he understood that the world outside the fence was different from the world inside. And he understood that if he did not go now, he would never go. He stood up and walked toward the gap. The gap was larger than he had thought. He could see beyond it now to the wild of 442B. The ground was red and cracked. Strange plants grew in patches, plants that looked like nothing on Earth. They had thick leaves that moved even when there was no wind, and they grew in shapes that made no sense. In the distance, a creature that might have been an animal moved between the plants. It was fast and small, could not see it clearly. He went through the gap. The air outside was different. It tasted less like metal and more like something else, something that was not human. It was colder than he had expected. The ground under his feet was harder than it looked. He could see the colony behind him, the structures rising up against the orange sky. People were moving inside, visible through transparent walls. Nobody was looking at him. Walked away from the fence. He was not running. He was just walking with his truck in his hand, away from the fear and the exhaustion. The red dirt spread out in front of him. The strange plants grew thicker. He was alone in the wild, and it was better than being inside. He did not hear the ship land on the other side of the colony. He did not hear the sounds of the warriors disembarking. He did not know that James was leading a small security team toward the colony center. He did not know that Governor Hayes was preparing to meet with the Alpha Beasts, the most feared predators in the known galaxy, warriors that had conquered 17 systems and broken the resistance of every species they had encountered. Just walked and played with his truck. When the warriors came, they came fast. They were tall, almost 3 meters each, with thick bodies covered in scales that looked like armor. Their claws were long, made for tearing. Their teeth were made for ripping. Their eyes were cold, like the eyes of things that had never needed to feel mercy. They moved with purpose and with speed. Commander led the group. He was larger than the others and moved with the confidence of something that had never failed at anything. He had come to negotiate with the humans. Negotiation for the meant presenting demands and watching as inferior species obeyed. The humans had resources. They needed those resources. It was simple. But saw something that made his strategy clearer. Through the scout reports and the ground cameras, he saw a small human child walking away from the colony, alone in the wild. The child was not fleeing into the main settlement. The child was exposed. The child was vulnerable. There, said to his warriors, pointing with one clawed hand toward, a human spawn, alone, weak. He looked at 3 of his largest warriors. Bring it to me, bring it alive. The humans will negotiate when they see what we have taken. The 3 warriors moved toward without hesitation. They had been bred for dominance. They had never faced an opponent they could not destroy. A child would take seconds. Looked up and saw them coming. He did not understand what was happening. He only understood that the things coming toward him were big and fast and wrong. They were not like anything on 442B. They were not like anything he had ever seen. They were like what the adults whispered about in fearful voices. They were like nightmares. Did not think, he ran. He ran back toward the colony, toward the gap in the fence, toward his mother and the structures and everything familiar. His truck fell from his hand, forgotten, tumbling across the red dirt. His feet slipped on the cracked ground. Behind him, the 3 warriors closed the distance with each stride. One of them reached out a clawed hand to grab him. And that was when Rusty came. The honey badger was called Rusty because of the color of his fur. He was old for a honey badger, maybe 8 years, and he had lived through every kind of fight that the wild of 442B could offer. He was smaller than a human child, maybe 2 kilos of pure muscle and fury. He had scars on his body from 100 battles. He had lost part of his ear to something with teeth. He had a claw mark across his ribs that had healed wrong. But Rusty was still alive, and Rusty was still fighting. Rusty lived near the colony because the colony had food he could steal. He lived in the wild because the wild was his. He did not understand fear. Fear was something for prey animals. Honey badgers did not have a word for fear in their instincts. When Rusty saw the warriors, he saw intruders. When he saw them move toward a small creature in his territory, he saw a challenge to his power. When he smelled them, he smelled something that did not belong. Rusty attacked. He came from the left, moving fast and low, using the native plants for cover. He hit the nearest warrior's leg with all of his weight, his teeth finding the place where the scales were thinnest. The alien warrior screamed a sound that had never come from any earth animal. The first warrior fell back, screaming. Rusty's teeth had torn through the scales on its leg and reached the soft tissue beneath. The pain was not something the warrior had been prepared for. Warriors did not expect pain. Warriors were supposed to deliver pain. But here was pain, sharp and immediate, coming from something so small that the warrior had not even seen it as a threat. Rusty did not stop. He moved to the second warrior with the speed of something that had spent its entire life hunting and fighting. The honey badger's small body made him a difficult target. The warriors were built for facing large opponents, other species that were comparable in size. Rusty was not comparable. Rusty was faster and lower and willing to do anything to win. The second warrior managed to grab Rusty's hind leg. The badger twisted, using muscles built for extreme flexibility, and bit the hand that held him. The claws of the were strong, but they were designed to tear flesh from distance with the power of a full swing. Up close, teeth were more useful. Rusty had teeth. Blood dripped onto the red dirt of 442B, dark blue blood from the warriors, red blood a little bit from where the warrior's grip had broken skin on Rusty's leg. The honey badger did not care about the small wound. Pain was just information. The information was that he needed to keep fighting. Ran through the gap in the fence and screamed. He screamed because he was 7 years old and afraid, and he did not know what else to do. He screamed his mother's name. He screamed for help. The sound echoed across the colony, high and pure and full of terror. Inside the medical facility, Wheeler heard her son's scream. She knew that scream. She knew it from her bones, from the part of her that was a mother before she was anything else. She dropped the diagnostic tool she was holding and ran. James heard the scream through the security feeds. He was in the command center, watching the landing, preparing for the negotiation. He saw on the cameras what was happening at the fence. He saw the warriors. He saw something small and fast and vicious fighting them. He saw Wheeler running. All security personnel to the eastern fence. Now, he said into the communication device. His voice was calm, but his hands were moving fast, preparing weapons, checking ammunition. We have contact. We have human civilians in danger. The third warrior had not yet engaged Rusty. The warrior was watching, trying to understand what was happening. The warrior was trained in combat. The warrior had been in battle many times, but the warrior had never seen anything like this. The small creature was moving in ways that made no sense. It was not trying to escape. It was not trying to hide. It was trying to hurt them. Rusty came at the third warrior like he had nothing to lose because he did not. Honey badgers were not designed to surrender. They were designed to fight until they won or died. Rusty had not died yet. The warrior tried to use its claws. Rusty was inside the claws, biting at the warrior's face, its body, trying to find anything soft and vulnerable. The warrior tried to crush him by falling backward. Rusty rolled with the movement, came up on top of the fallen warrior and bit at the eyes. It was a calculated attack, the kind of attack that came from 1,000 years of evolution in a harsh world. The eyes were soft. The eyes could end a fight. The warrior screamed again, louder this time, and threw Rusty off with a wild motion. The honey badger tumbled through the air and landed hard against the fence. The impact knocked the breath from his body, but Rusty came back up, ready to fight again. Commander watched from his position. His expression changed. The cold confidence that had marked every moment of his existence cracked, just a little. He watched his 3 elite warriors struggling against an animal that weighed less than a human child. He watched the animal refuse to acknowledge the dominance. He watched the animal fight like it had the right to fight back. "What is this creature?" asked one of the other warriors standing near him. "Unknown, Commander. It was not listed in the preliminary scans. It is small. It should not be capable of this level of combat." "It should not be capable of this level of anything," said, "and yet it is." The second warrior managed to put distance between himself and Rusty. His leg was bleeding. His hand was torn. He was breathing hard. He called out to the commander. "Request backup. This creature is not stopping." The first warrior was still down, unable to stand, his leg too damaged. The third warrior was moving slowly, wary now, afraid in a way that they did not often experience. Rusty stood between them and the colony entrance, his body low, his teeth showing. He had won 100 small battles with small creatures. He had fought against the native predators of 442B and survived. He understood something that the warriors did not understand. This was his territory. These warriors were invaders. Invaders needed to be driven out. Wheeler reached the colony gate. James was already there, along with 5 security personnel, weapons drawn. They looked at the scene in front of them. They looked at the honey badger fighting 3 warriors. They looked at, dirty and crying, running toward his mother. Grabbed her son and held him tight. She did not speak. She just held him and felt him alive and whole. She looked at Rusty, and for a moment she understood something about the universe. Sometimes help came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes survival meant accepting aid from creatures that were not your own kind. Sometimes the smallest fighter could be the strongest. James made a decision. "Do not fire," he said to his team. "We do not start a war today. We protect the child and we support the animal. Fire only if the aliens move toward the colony." He raised his own weapon and aimed it at the warriors. His team did the same. It created a strange situation. The warriors were pinned between the honey badger in front and human weapons behind. They could not advance. They could not retreat without losing face. Made a calculation. His warriors were wounded. The humans had weapons. The small creature was still fighting. Advancing would cost more than he could afford, and something in the commander was beginning to understand that this colony was not going to be easy. "Withdraw," commanded. "Retreat to the landing site. Bring the wounded." The 3 warriors disengaged from Rusty, moving backward toward the landing craft. The honey badger did not follow. He stood at the fence line, watching them go, his breathing hard, his body covered in wounds. But he was still standing. He had driven them back. Rusty turned and looked at. The child was still crying, but he was alive. The child was holding his mother. The honey badger had done what honey badgers did. He had defended his territory. He had protected the young. He had refused to accept dominance. James and his team lowered their weapons. In the distance, the ship began to power up. The warriors were boarding, carrying their wounded. The landing had not gone as planned. The alpha beasts had come expecting to demonstrate superiority. They had found something different. "Get the medical team," said Tu. She was looking at Rusty, who was now moving slowly, limping back toward the fence. "That animal needs help, now." The honey badger had saved her son. She would make sure the honey badger lived. watched as Rusty limped away, his small body damaged but unbroken. "He helped me," said. "He helped me, Mommy." "Yes," said, pulling her son closer. "He did, he really did." Watched the colony from the observation deck of his ship. His warriors had been defeated by an animal no bigger than a human's hand. His reputation, built on 1,000 conquests and 1,000 victories, had been damaged by something that should not have been able to damage anything. "Take us to the command station," he said to his pilot. "I want to speak with the humans. I want to understand what just happened." The ship lifted off the ground, leaving behind the red dirt and the orange sky, and the honey badger that had changed the medical facility became a place of quiet urgency. Wheeler worked with the skills of someone who had learned medicine in a hard world, in a place where there was no room for mistakes. Rusty lay on a steel table, his breathing slow and careful. The honey badger was unconscious, sedated by a compound that hoped would work on his biology without killing him. She had never treated a honey badger before. She had only treated humans. But this was not a human. "His ribs are definitely fractured," said to her assistant, who was monitoring the sedation levels. "3 of them on the left side. There is internal bleeding, but it seems minor. The wounds on his face and body are deep, but nothing vital was damaged." She worked with careful hands, cleaning the wounds, using a regenerative gel that was designed for human tissue but might work on other animals. She had to hope that biology was similar enough. She had to hope that the honey badger's body would accept the medical intervention. Sat in the corner of the medical facility watching his mother work. He had been given clean clothes. His dirt had been washed away, but his eyes were still wide, still processing what had happened outside the fence. A woman named Carol sat with him, giving him small pieces of fruit and talking about simple things, but his attention was entirely on Rusty. "Will he be okay?" asked. "We do not know yet," said, not taking her eyes from the wounds she was treating. "But he is strong. He fought 3 warriors and did not give up. That kind of strength usually means survival." In the command center, James prepared his report for Governor Hayes. The ship was in high orbit now, but it had not left the system. That was the crucial piece. They had not abandoned their mission. They were regrouping, reassessing, understood military strategy. He knew what was happening. They were not running away. They were preparing for something else. "The honey badger saved the child," said to Hayes. "That is the fact. The alpha beasts came expecting to take a hostage. A native animal prevented it. Now they are in orbit, probably trying to figure out how they respond to being stopped by something that weighs 2 kilos. Hayes was a practical man. He had come to 442B as a governor because the government needed someone who would not break under pressure. He had seen colonies fall. He had seen humans fail. He had also seen them survive and adapt. "They will make contact again," Hayes said. "They will demand answers about what the creature was. They will demand access to the weapons technology that defeated their warriors. They will demand something because surrender is not in their nature." "What do we do?" asked. "We tell them the truth," Hayes said. "We tell them that a honey badger fought back when they threatened a child. We tell them that this is what humans do. We protect our young. And we tell them that this colony is not worth what it will cost them to take it." The ship sent a communication request, wanted a meeting. He wanted to speak with the human leadership directly. He wanted to understand. And there was something in his request that suggested he was no longer thinking like a conqueror. Governor Hayes and James boarded the small shuttle that would take them to the command vessel. Had wanted to go to explain about Rusty, to make the aliens understand that they had encountered something that refused to be conquered. But Hayes needed her in the colony, treating the injured animal, maintaining the hope that Rusty would recover. The shuttle docked with the ship. The docking procedure was slow, careful, deliberately formal. These were 2 species trying to be civilized, even though both of them understood that civility was sometimes just a moment between conflicts. Waited in the negotiation chamber. The room was built for his size, with high ceilings and furniture designed for weight and strength. The human leaders looked small in the space, but they stood straight. They did not appear afraid. Commander Hayes began, using the formal greeting. "I am Governor Hayes. This is Chief James. We are here to discuss what happened at our colony." "You are here," said, "to explain how an animal defeated my warriors." "The animal did not defeat them," said calmly. "The animal simply refused to allow them to hurt our child. That is a difference." "It is a small difference," said, but his eyes were moving, processing, thinking. Your species claims to be peaceful, yet you use animals as weapons. We do not use the honey badger as a weapon, Hayes said. The honey badger lives in our territory. It defends its territory as all animals do. We had nothing to do with its actions. Then you have no control over your animals, said. That is weakness. Weakness should be eliminated. With respect, said, I think you misunderstood what you saw. The honey badger was not showing weakness. The honey badger was showing something that the do not understand. The honey badger was showing that even the smallest creature will fight when something it values is threatened. It was not trying to win a war. It was trying to protect its territory, and it succeeded. Was quiet for a long moment. In that silence, something was happening in his mind. There were a species that measured value in combat effectiveness, in territorial control, in the ability to dominate, but was also something else. He was intelligent. He was capable of understanding new ideas. The child said, Why did you not simply comply with my initial demand? Why did you not hand over the child? Because the child is ours. His voice came through the communication system from the colony. Hayes had set up a video link, and she was speaking from the medical facility. Because human mothers protect their children, because we do not trade our young for safety, and because even a small animal understands that some things are more important than individual survival. Looked at the screen where appeared. She was holding her son, who was looking at the communicator with serious eyes. The child was not afraid anymore. The child was understood that his mother had fought for him, and now his mother was still fighting for him. You place value on this child, said. More value than you place on your own safety. Yes, said. That is what it means to be human. Stood, he moved to the window of his chamber and looked down at the planet below. Red dirt, orange sky, a small honey badger that had changed everything. I came to this world expecting to find a weak species that would accept our terms, he said. I found something different. I found creatures that will fight even when they have no hope of winning. I found animals that will risk death to protect territory. I found humans that will defend their children with everything they have. He turned back to face the human leaders. These are not the traits of a weak species. No, Hayes said, they are not. I will withdraw my forces from your colony, said. I will inform the other that 442b is not worth the cost of conquest. Your species is harder to break than we believed. We are grateful, Hayes said. Do not be grateful, said. Be ready. The galaxy is full of other species that will test you. If you can fight like a small animal for what you value, you may survive. He paused. Tell me about this honey badger. Tell me why such a small creature is so dangerous. And in that moment, the negotiation changed. It was no longer about conquest. It was about understanding. Wanted to learn about the creature that had made him reconsider everything he knew about strength and weakness. The commander spent the next hour listening as the humans explained the honey badger. They explained how the creature lived in harsh conditions. They explained how it hunted things much larger than itself. They explained how it refused to surrender, even when surrender would keep it alive. When the meeting ended, had made a decision. His ship would leave, but not in shame. His ship would leave as the bringer of a new understanding to the species. The universe was not divided into dominators and the dominated. There was a third category. There were creatures that fought because fighting was what they did, regardless of size or strength. As the shuttle returned to the colony, James looked at Hayes. We won, said. We did not win, Hayes said, but we survived, and that is victory enough. In the medical facility, Rusty opened his eyes. The sedation was wearing off, checked his vital signs. The honey badger was breathing well, the wounds were stable, the internal bleeding had stopped. Ran to the table where Rusty lay. You are waking up, said. You are going to be okay, you are so brave. 3 weeks passed, Rusty's ribs healed, the wounds on his face closed, and Wheeler changed his bandages every day, talking to him as she worked. The honey badger did not understand the words, but he understood the sound of her voice. He understood that she was helping him. He understood that he was safe. Was in the medical facility every day after his lessons. The colony had resumed normal operations. The threat had passed. Children were supposed to return to their routines, but could not stop thinking about the animal that had saved him. He did not go back to playing with his truck. Instead, he sat with Rusty and read stories aloud. Today I am reading about bravery, said, holding a screen that displayed text written for children. It says that bravery is not the absence of fear. Bravery is doing the right thing even when you are afraid. He looked at Rusty. But you were not afraid, were you? You just fought. Rusty shifted his position. The movement was still careful, still measured, but it was getting stronger. The honey badger's eyes followed around the room. There was something between them now, something that had nothing to do with pack behavior or animal instinct. There was recognition. Rusty had protected the young, and the young had stayed with him through the healing. That meant something. Watched them from across the room. She was inputting medical records into the colony database, but part of her attention was always on her son and the animal. She had seen something remarkable happen. She had seen her son stop being afraid of the world and start being curious about it. She had seen him find courage in places he had not looked before. The colony itself had changed, slowly but changed. People began to tell the story. The honey badger became something more than just an animal. It became a symbol. It became proof that the universe was not always about who was bigger or stronger. Sometimes it was about who refused to give up. James installed cameras around the perimeter of the colony to monitor for native wildlife. In the footage, he often saw Rusty returning to his territory. The honey badger would come to the fence, looking at the colony, looking for, and sometimes would bring outside, and the boy would talk to the animal through the fence. They were bonding in a way that humans and animals did not usually bond. But this was not a usual situation. Governor Hayes called a colony-wide meeting. The transmission came from the communication center, reaching into homes and workstations. When people gathered in the central hall, Hayes stood on a platform, his bearing formal but his expression warm. "We were tested," Hayes said to his people. "We were tested by a species that had conquered 17 other worlds. We were tested by an encounter that we should have lost, but we did not lose, and that success came because of choices we made." He paused, letting his words settle. The first choice was James. When he saw the danger, he did not escalate the violence. He protected, he supported, he chose strategy over force. Standing in the back of the hall, nodded slightly. The second choice was Wheeler's. When she heard her son in danger, she did what mothers do. She came, she acted, she loved fiercely. Stood within the crowd. The boy was looking at his mother, understanding that she was being recognized for what she had done. And the third choice, Hayes continued, was made by a creature that is not even human. Rusty the honey badger made a choice to fight, to defend territory, to refuse to accept that he was too small to make a difference. The crowd was quiet, listening. Those three choices combined saved us, not because any one of them was powerful enough alone, but because together they created something that they did not expect and could not overcome. Unity, purpose, refusal to surrender. The meeting ended. People began to talk about what Hayes had said, and slowly the colony changed. Not dramatically, but the fear began to lift. The exhaustion began to fade. People started to talk about building something, not just surviving something. In the medical facility was reading again. Rusty was almost healed now. Soon the honey badger would be able to go back to his life in the wild. The thought made sad, but he understood. Rusty was not a colony animal. Rusty was a wild creature that had done wild things. "I want you to stay," said to the honey badger. "But I know you cannot. You are a hunter. You need to be free. But I will remember you. I will remember that you fought for me." Rusty made a small sound, something between a growl and a chirp. It was not speech, but it was communication. The honey badger understood that the young human was saying goodbye. Put her hand on her son's shoulder. "He will come back sometimes," she said. "Animals do that. They mark their territory. He will remember you. He will remember this place." "How do you know?" asked. "Because," said, "he came to you in the first place. You were not just a child to him. You were something that belonged to his world. That does not change." That night made a decision. She filed a request with the colony administration. She was going to create a program. She was going to study the honey badgers of 442B. She was going to learn about them, document their behavior, understand how they survived in this harsh world. She was going to help the colony establish protocols for living alongside these animals instead of just coexisting with them. Her request was approved. She would be the colony's first animal biologist, would assist her, learning about science, learning about patience, learning about the creatures that shared his world. The ship transmitted a final message before leaving the system. Commander had returned to his home world, but he had sent a data file to the colony. The file contained the official report of what had happened. James read it and then brought it to. "They are calling the honey badger. a creature of exceptional tactical capability and devotion to territory defense, said, reading from the translation. They are recommending that all forces approach worlds with honey badger populations with extreme caution. Laughed, it was a genuine laugh, not the tired laugh of someone carrying too much weight. They are afraid of him, she said. The greatest predators in the galaxy are afraid of a 2-kilo animal. Not afraid, said, but respectful, and that is something. In the quiet of the medical facility, Rusty was moved to a larger space that had prepared. The honey badger could move freely now, his body strong again, his wounds mostly healed. The wounds would add to the scars he already carried. But that was what warriors looked like. That was what survival looked like. Sat with Rusty one more time before the animal went back to the wild. You changed everything, said. You came here to protect your territory, but you protected me. You protected my mother. You protected everyone. Rusty looked at the boy with eyes that had seen many things. The honey badger had fought countless battles, but this one had been different. This one had meant something that went beyond territory and instinct. The next morning opened the door of the facility. Rusty walked out, slow and steady, toward the fence. Followed, walking beside the animal. When they reached the fence, knelt down and hugged Rusty. The honey badger allowed it, standing still while the boy's arms wrapped around his body. Come back, whispered. Please come back. Rusty slipped through the fence gap, the same gap where had escaped 3 weeks before. The honey badger turned back once, looking at the boy. Then he walked away, into the red dirt and the strange plants, into the wild that was his home. Watched until Rusty disappeared into the distance. His mother put her arm around him. He will come back, said again. Not because we need him to, but because he chooses to. And that is the greatest victory of all, not that we defeated but that we made a friend of something wild and fierce and free. The colony settled into evening. The orange sky became purple, then black. Stars emerged overhead. Somewhere in that vast darkness, the ship was traveling between systems, carrying word of a world where even the smallest creature had changed everything. 1 year passed. The colony had transformed from a desperate outpost into something that resembled hope. New buildings had been constructed. The agricultural systems had been improved. The population had grown slightly as supply ships brought new colonists. These new arrivals had heard the story of the honey badger before they even arrived on the planet. Some of them came because of that story. Wheeler was now 8 years old. He spent his time between his school lessons and his work with his mother in the biological research facility. Had established a small laboratory where she studied the native creatures of 442b. The honey badgers were her primary focus, but she was learning about the entire ecosystem, discovering how each creature fit into the whole system. Had become something of a celebrity among the children in the colony. He was the boy who had been protected by a legendary animal, but he did not like being famous. He preferred working with his mother, learning about the creatures that lived in the wild. Look at this, said, showing her son a data display. The screen showed footage from one of the perimeter cameras. A female honey badger was moving through the colony territory with 3 young kits. The kits were small, barely big enough to follow their mother. But they followed, learning the territory, learning what it meant to survive on 442b. That is Rusty's mate, said. And those are their young. We have documented 7 kits born this year from honey badgers that live near the colony. The population is growing. Studied the footage with concentration. He was learning to see the animals not as stories, but as creatures with lives of their own, with families and territories and purposes that had nothing to do with humans. Do you think Rusty remembers? Asked. Do you think he remembers when he came to save me? He remembers, said. She was certain of this because she had watched Rusty return to the colony multiple times. The honey badger would come to the fence, near the medical facility where and his mother worked. The animal did not show emotions the way humans did, but there was something in the way Rusty looked at, something that suggested recognition and continuity. A message came through the communication system. James was requesting that and come to the command center. There was important news. When they arrived, was looking at a star map. The map showed human territory, and the routes that ships traveled between the stars. We have been approached by representatives from 3 different species, said. All of them have heard the story of 442b. All of them want to establish peaceful trade relationships with us. Word has spread through the galaxy about what happened here. And exchanged a look. The alpha beasts were stopped by a small animal, continued. That information has become very valuable. Other species want to know if we have the ability to train these creatures. They want to know if we can weaponize the honey badgers. No, said immediately. That is not what happened. Rusty did not fight for us. He fought for his territory. He fought because something inside him refused to accept dominance. We cannot control that. We cannot train that. We can only understand it. That is what I told them, said. And they still want to talk to you. They want to talk too. They want to understand how a young human and a wild animal created the diplomatic incident that changed the balance of power in this region of space. Was quiet, he was thinking about something. The honey badger did not change the balance of power, said slowly. We changed it. We chose not to give up. Rusty showed us that. He showed us that it is possible to fight something bigger than you and not lose. Looked at her son with pride. He was right. The honey badger had not created an army or a weapon. The honey badger had demonstrated a principle, and that principle was more powerful than any military force. Over the next few months, representatives from different species came to 442B. They came to study, to learn, to understand what had happened here. Some of them were friendly. Some of them were just curious. But all of them left with the same understanding. This was a colony that had refused to be conquered. And that refusal had been based not on superior weapons or greater numbers, but on choice. Governor Hayes created a memorial in the center of the colony. It was a stone structure, simple and powerful. On the stone, there was a carving of a honey badger, smaller than life-size but detailed, showing the animal in a posture of defense. Beneath the carving, words were inscribed. To Rusty, who taught us that size does not determine strength, that refusal to surrender is the greatest power, that even the smallest creature can change the course of history. The ceremony to dedicate the memorial brought the entire colony together. People stood in the orange light of 442B's sun and thought about what it meant to be human. They thought about what it meant to survive. They thought about what it meant to choose to protect something you loved. Placed his hand on the stone carving. He closed his eyes and thought about the moment when he had seen Rusty coming toward the warriors. He thought about the terror and the gratitude. He thought about the fact that his mother was safe, that he was safe, because a creature that was not his own kind had decided to fight. Mommy said, I want to understand more. I want to understand all the honey badgers. I want to study them the way you do. Looked at her son. This was the boy who had run into the wild, scared and confused. This was the boy who had been saved by an animal and had chosen to give back love and care. This was the boy who would grow up understanding the universe in a different way than most humans. Then we will do that together, said. We will spend our lives learning about these creatures. We will make sure that what happened here is remembered correctly. We will make sure that the universe knows about Rusty not as a weapon or a tool, but as a creature that refused to be broken by something larger. Years passed, grew. He became a scientist in his own right, working alongside his mother. Together, they published research about the honey badgers of 442B. They documented behavior, population dynamics, social structures. They wrote papers that were read by scientists across the galaxy. But never forgot the core truth. The honey badger had not been studied or trained or controlled. The honey badger had simply been himself. And that authenticity, that refusal to be anything other than what he was born to be, had changed everything. When he was 15 years old, he was working in the research facility late in the evening. His mother was asleep in the living quarters. The colony was quiet, most people resting after the day's work. Heard a sound at the window. He looked outside and saw a familiar figure. Rusty was old now. His fur was in patches. His scars were deep and numerous, but his eyes were still bright. The honey badger looked at through the window and understood. Rusty was saying hello. Rusty was saying that he remembered. Rusty was saying that they were still bound by that moment that day when everything had changed. Walked outside. The honey badger did not come through the fence. Instead, Rusty stood on the other side and stood on this side, and they looked at each other in the darkness of the 442B evening. Thank you, said. He knew the animal could not understand words, but he also knew that some communication went deeper than language. Rusty made that small sound again, something between a growl and a chirp. The honey badger turned and disappeared into the darkness, back to his territory, back to his life in the wild. Stood at the fence for a long time after Rusty was gone. He thought about the story that had changed his world. He thought about how a 7-year-old boy and a fearless animal had taught the galaxy that size was not strength. That the ability to refuse dominance was stronger than the ability to dominate. That every creature, no matter how small, had the power to change history. In the years that followed, 442b became known as the world of the honey badger. New colonies were established on the planet. New research facilities were built. Scientists came from across the galaxy to study the creatures that had defeated the alpha beasts through simple refusal to surrender. But the original colony, New Harmony, remained special. It was the place where it had happened. It was the place where an animal had chosen to protect a child, and where that child had grown up understanding that the universe was larger, stranger, and more beautiful than anyone had known. Wheeler eventually became one of the most respected scientists in human space, but he never forgot what he owed to a creature that did not belong to his species. He published a book about his experiences, and in that book, he wrote about the truth of what had happened. He wrote, "The honey badger did not save us because it was trained to. It did not save us because it was told to. It saved us because something inside every creature, no matter how small, refuses to accept that others have the right to take what belongs to us. Rusty fought because he was rusty. He fought because he was free, and in his freedom he taught us what freedom meant." The book became essential reading in schools across human space. Children read about the honey badger and about the boy who had learned to love an animal that was wild and fierce and could never truly be tamed. Years after his childhood, when he was old and Rusty was long gone, legends had grown around the story. Some people said the honey badger had been specially bred for combat. Some people said it had been an alien creature in disguise. Some people created myths that grew further and further from the truth. But knew the real story. The real story was simpler and more profound. A small creature had chosen to fight, and in that choice everything had changed. The colony of New Harmony stood on 442b for centuries. Through many generations, humans lived in the shadow of that day when the smallest animal had refused to be overwhelmed by the greatest predators. And they lived knowing that size was not the measure of strength. Courage was, refusal to surrender was, love was. And in the wild parts of the planet, the honey badgers lived as they had always lived. Fierce, free, unbroken, refusing to accept dominance from any creature, no matter how large. They were the descendants of Rusty, carrying in their blood the legacy of a moment when everything changed. When an animal no bigger than a child's hand stepped between danger and a young human and said simply, with teeth and claws and absolute refusal to back down, "This is mine. This is my territory. This is what I will fight for, and I will not lose." And in the wild of 442b, Rusty moved through the red dirt, and Strong, a hunter that had learned to protect things that were not his own territory. But they were, because he had chosen to defend them, and choice was the most powerful thing of all. Rusty looked at the boy. The honey badger did not understand words, but he understood something else. He understood that this young human was part of his territory. He understood that he had protected what was his. He understood that the fight was over. The honey badger's eyes closed again, but this time it was not pain that pulled him under. It was the peaceful sleep of something that had fought and won. Outside the medical facility, the orange sky of 442b turned to darkness. Stars emerged above. Somewhere in the void between stars, the ship was leaving, carrying with it a lesson about a world where even the smallest creature could change everything. The galaxy was larger and more complicated than anyone had believed, and that was something that would matter long after this day was finished. Everything. The honey badger was on him like rage was not enough. He bit and scratched and moved in ways that the warrior could not predict. The warrior tried to grab him, but Rusty was faster. The warrior tried to step on him, but Rusty was underneath, then above, then somewhere else. Dark blue blood dripped into the red dirt. Kept running, he did not look back. He did not understand what was happening, but he knew that the small animal was helping him. He knew that something had changed. He knew he was not alone.